Hello.
Pete, hello.
Can you hear me?
7 o'clock.
Can you hear me?
How are you, Mari? Oh, you can't hear. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Great. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Also doing well.
Would
So
you like to
let's.
introduce yourself?
I'll go ahead and introduce. I'm Jocelyn Fear. All of my middle school students that I've been teaching call me Miss Josie. So Josie is certainly fine. I think that's a fun nickname. And I am my pronouns are she, her, and I am a transgender singer, vocalist, teacher, composer, and, family person, parent. And I was invited, why I'm here with you, uh, is that I was invited to be on the organizing committee for a festival conference about transgender singing and the transgender voice called the Transgender Voices Festival, which I didn't find the pamphlet for, but I found the even more important tote bag. These are the things that I look for at conferences, are the tote bags. So yeah, which was awesome. The festival. So have you introduced yourself?
I did briefly in the beginning. I'll do it again. My name is
Okay.
Mari. Mari Esabel Valverde. I'm also openly trans composer and singer. And I've had the privilege to work with One Voice Mixed Chorus in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, which is your ensemble, and the ensemble that hosted this event. And that is conducted by Jane Ramsire Miller, who would be here if she could be.
Yeah. I mean, Jane is awesome, and she I think, been um, has a very long history of being very trans inclusive, trans supportive, and has really been at this forefront, even within the LGBT course community, of pushing for more trans inclusive language, more trans inclusive environments, and really trying to open up what is, um, you know, singing the voice has a very long history of being highly gendered. And I think Jane has been at the forefront of really trying to break that open. And certainly that is one of the reasons why we put on the festival, is to um, sort of look at and say, um, you know, there is so much to celebrate in singing with the voice, that is so beautiful and that is beyond gender. So to try to look at and get rid of some of the language, to try to understand some of the concerns and some of the special needs of transgender singers. So it was one part celebration and also one part education for potential allies in singing and choral communities.
That was definitely the vibe at the festival. It was really surreal to be in. The first day it was a church, second day it was Macalester College. It was surreal to be in a physical space where cisgender people were the minority.
Mm?
But I mean, that gave transgender singers and artists to a space to feel like the majority. Um, and that's unique, definitely. And I understand this is not the first festival or the first time that this event has happened. But the first time was several years ago, and
Correct.
politically we're in a very different place now.
Very much so. Yeah, I think the first one was in like in the early 2000s, in the early aughts, 2004 or maybe 2006 or 7. So it's been 10 years at least. And now the talk is after the festival. It was so successful and such a huge excitement about it that we're talking about trying to have them happen more regularly. There's some talk of hosting the next one in Portland. So
Portland, Oregon?
Portland, Oregon. And so we are, I think that, like all things transgender at the moment, there's a little bit more visibility and a little bit more excitement and energy. And I think the same thing is happening for transgender singers and for transgender choruses. Speaking about, being trans and being in the majority for once, it was, I heard talk from several non-binary people about one of the workshops was a non-binary singing circle. And it was a closed space so that you, if you identified as non-binary, you were certainly welcome, but it was for non-binary people. And it was just, a room of people that don't feel quite right being in, or feeling not just male or not just female, and being in a room of that very loosely gendered, extravagantly gendered space was
allowing people to choose, have agency for, have that space for conversation that
right.
isn't readily available in our churches or schools or
Right.
community organizations. I was also going to bring up, on top of having non-binary people and transgender people attend this festival, one of the aspects that I thought was really amazing was that the festival, the registration for the festival was on a sliding scale. So if anybody wanted to attend but couldn't afford the registration fee, which I think was, the sliding scale was $0 to $100 a day. Is
Right.
that correct?
Or for the
Um,
zero, yeah. And then there was also the option of getting a lunch from the festival, being provided a lunch. And that, I believe, was also on scale. So that, one of the major things, actually, we'll come back to that, write that down, lock it in my head. But let me just read the mission statement, if I can, because I think it really gives a good idea of what we were trying to do and in trying to make this a really inclusive, accessible, available space. So this is the mission statement or statement of purpose that the organizing committee or the guidance committee was working with as we were putting the festival together. Our goal was to offer a place for transgender singers across musical genres and cultures to explore our voices and identities, grow as artists, and learn techniques for voice care. The festival will also be a place for voice teachers, music teachers, and choir directors to learn about the transgender voice, gain a deeper understanding of trans and gender non-conforming experience, and receive tools to support singing in the classrooms and beyond. Transgender Voices Festival is guided by values of social justice, gender justice, inclusivity, and accessibility. We recognize and wish to represent the diversity and intersections of identity in our communities, including those of race, gender identity and expression, age, ability or disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion or belief, and more. We center the voices of trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary people. And we value a learning and supportive space for all where it's safe to ask questions, be authentic and vulnerable in support of our goals of reducing isolation, building community, and creating social change. So it's a long list.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. But right there in sort of the first bullet point, we wanted to make sure that, um, you know, honestly, I mean, for a person like myself who is, is white, is economically stable, is, um, you know, for a person like me, I would, have lots of access to resources, uh, sort of just naturally. I'm educated. I can go to and find the resources that I need whenever I need them. And it was something that we wanted to be very aware of, that, you know, the people that need the resources the most, the people who probably were going to get the most out of this conference, out of the festival, are the people that have less access.
It's a question of privilege, and it's so important, even as trans people, to talk about intersections and how we may or may not be privileged. I think a lot of these organizations are starting to pay attention to the absence of certain communities in our concerts, in our programs, and it comes from really a deep culture and practice of, if not erasing certain voices, not elevating enough certain voices. And I mean, there are, how many trans people are in your chorus?
Let's see here, in the bass section alone, when I was up there, I count about 7 in our section, and that includes trans men and also trans women, and also a few non-binary people as well.
7?
7 in the bass section.
Holy.
Let's see here. We have, I think we have a couple of trans women singing alto. I think we have a couple of trans or non-binary people singing tenor as well. So I mean, we're talking about a dozen or more trans people in our chorus.
Is that 10%? Is that 8%?
Yeah, 10%. It's about 10%. Our chorus is about 120 people, and I would say that about 10% of the chorus is trans.
Now, my follow-up question, because I am a person of color, I'm wondering how many people of color there are in your ensemble.
Let's see here. How many? One.
If you know.
One.
Just
I mean, there may
one?
be. Let's see here. Just one. I'm trying to think.
Oh my goodness. Come on, Minnesota.
Well, and we're very aware of that. We've been trying, I think, for at least since I've been there, to really highlight racial issues. We've had a concert that featured a piece by Steve Malloy, who's an African American composer.
Y'all are very good about programming.
We are really trying to figure that. And in fact, this next year, as Jane is going on sabbatical, our guest conductor is, I don't remember his last name, Tesfa.
Wanda Magniu.
Yes. Anyway, he is.
Don't ask me to spell that, though.
No. No, but also a person of color. So organizationally, we are trying to elevate voices that, even in our intersectionality, we're very aware of being underrepresented.
And Tesfa is amazing and um, you know, merits such a role.
Hmm.
Um, I would just say how important for me. I certainly think this often when I attend concerts or learn about choral organizations, you know, or when I'm looking at a program, a concert program, you know, I'm always looking for how inclusive the programming is or the staff is in terms of representing different genders, different experiences, economic class, et cetera, et cetera. So I, it is it's a mission, you know, and we're trying to get better at that,
Yeah.
and it's encouraging to see uh, people like Tesfa, and frankly, uh, myself being commissioned by One Voice in the past. I feel, you know, I really appreciate that, and I recognize that, and I think it is a testament to your organization. Um, so I see some comments, and I just wanted to take a second to reiterate that we welcome your questions. You have two openly trans musicians here, so there's probably a bajillion questions you can think about. Um, and we're privileged to have the platform of the American Choral Directors Association to 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 have this conversation so openly.
Yeah.
And please, let's take advantage of this time together. If y'all have any questions, let us know. We can see you trending the little messages. Um, just to get back to the festival,
Hmm.
I I keep on pulling this program out. We also have at the end of the so the con no, the festival, I want to say convention, the convention. See, I want to say it. It was 2 days. The second day was snowed out by a blizzard.
Hmm.
So we didn't. It was really more like 1.5 days. Um, but every minute really counted. We ended each day with a an all trans cabaret, which was a mix of uh, a musical recital as well as a poetry recital. We had I could just pull out and read names, but and you know, oh, also the choirs.
Hmm.
What can you make a few comments about those the cabaret that happened both
Sure.
both evenings?
Yeah. So first, I did want to catch a quick question. I do want to come back to it. So Edrin asks, we think that classic formal attire for choirs, tuxedos, and gowns alienates trans singers? Um, and my response is that somewhat tongue-in-cheek response is that everybody looks good in a tux. I think that as long as there is flexibility in who gets to choose whether they're wearing a tuxedo or a gown. So, for instance, it would be um, alienating for a trans, or excuse me, alienating for a choir director to say, all right, the um, sopranos and altos have to wear gowns and the tenors and basses have to wear tuxes, for instance. That would be alienating. But certainly, if the was, as far as I'm concerned, you know, everybody wearing tuxes or everybody wearing formal choir robes. You know, if there was a desire for some sort of universal look, then make it really universal. Make it something that anyone would feel comfortable wearing.
I would almost say, especially because we're seeing more non-binary singers come out of the closet and want to participate just like any other singer, that the two options of a gown or a tuxedo is pretty limiting. I understand that choral directors and their staffs have to merchant there's a vendor and a particular market, and that market is very binary. I would just encourage everyone, even as a blanket rule. It's not this, we don't have any trans singers in our choir, we don't have any non-binary singers in our choir. You never know, because a lot of trans and non-binary singers, especially young singers, are not going to make a comment about their identity if they don't know that the choral director is going to support them. And in terms of attire, if you, at the beginning of, I'm thinking about school because I worked in high schools. The beginning of the school year, when everybody's getting fitted and signed up, if the choral director makes a point to say, we are, you can choose whether you wear a gown or a tuxedo, or if there's a third option, say that up front. And who knows, you may have even some cisgender, meaning non-transgender singers who opt for, some other attire just because that's what makes them feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
in a sense, that is a way to still look uniform as
yeah.
a ensemble.
Yeah. And I see Michael is commenting about being non-binary and wanting a third option. So that's very important. And I do think that, like Mari said, it's not just a choir director can't come at it from a place of, we don't have to make an accommodation because there's nobody to accommodate. I don't have to worry about being explicit in providing a third option because I don't have any non-binary singers in my chorus. I don't have any transgender singers in my chorus. One of the goals that I think any choir director, any choir organization has is that they actually want members. They want people to be singing. So if you are not, even if it's true that you have absolutely no trans-identified or non-binary singers in your choir, the question then becomes, well, why not? Let me just share a statistic that I'm tossing out. So in St. Paul Public Schools, we're looking at about 3% of our student population as being trans or gender nonconforming right now. And that's across the entire district for the high schools. So 3%'s not insignificant. And so the chances of, and these people grow into trans and gender nonconforming adults. So I think it would probably be fair to say that if you have a choir of 100 people, that you should probably expect to have 3 trans singers. I mean, why not?
If you see any more questions,
Yeah.
or if people have more questions, please let us know. To kind of piggyback on that, I wanted to bring up, and it's very, at least in Texas, it's very common for at the high school level or just like adult choirs to have gendered choirs. So instead of saying men's chorus or instead of saying women's chorus, we're saying maybe treble chorus and perhaps tenor bass chorus. I've seen some of that. Some other directors have found more like creative options to address that question. But to tie it in, just going back to this question of attire, just because you have a chorus that is a treble chorus that is a majority, female chorus, doesn't mean you don't need tuxedos.
That's true too.
So, in the same sense, we are only serving I also come from this as a pedagogue, as a teacher. We are only better serving our students, our singers, when we basically break the gender binary. The gender binary limits us in a lot of ways, but to speak about that pedagogically, young singers especially identify with a particular section or whatnot. It's almost counterproductive to tell that young female or non-binary person you're an alto, because that has a psychological impact, when the fact of the matter is they may very well grow into a bass someday. So it's just the voice is a human thing, and more than gender, as a teacher we're more concerned about the health of the voice and healthy singing. So I think that when you come to an event like this and you see a whole trans youth chorus, where the gender is represented as a spectrum, then it's just a freer environment for everybody. And there's no reason we can't have that in our youth courses everywhere, or high school courses or whatnot.
Yeah. And if you are a teacher and you happen to be watching this, if you are a high school choral director or even a college choral director, you know, be mindful of, say, terminology in your course books. So I have one high school that I've taught at, and the director is very affirming, very supportive ally, but on the, in the catalog at the school and on her attendance sheets, it says, for the essay, it says women's chorus beginning. And for the TV, it says men's chorus beginning. And that's very limiting. The question is, all right, so if I am a person who is going to be going through the testosterone vocal change, but I'm in 9th grade and that just hasn't happened for me yet, where am I supposed to sign up to sing in a choir?
That's even a confusing and stressful moment for a cis male to go through. I want to bring the conversation also to pronouns. However, there's a question. As a former collegiate men's chorus director, I am curious about your thoughts about the title men's chorus, if they make it clear that anyone that identifies as male is welcome to be a part of this ensemble via an audition. That is a very 21st century question and a very important question. Do you want to make a comment, Joselyn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with, I'm okay if the interest of the chorus and the organization and the choral director is to be a space for men and for women or for non-binary people. If that is one of the core identities of the space you're trying to create, then go for it. Just as long as you understand, or as long as you make it understood and make opportunities available that the men's chorus means all men, even if that includes, or especially if that includes trans men that are not choosing to take hormones to go through a testosterone vocal change for one reason.
I want to stop really quick just to point out that we talk about hormones a lot when we're discussing the voice and specifically the pedagogy of singers. and when you're talking about trans and non-binary people, it's really important for the general public to understand that not all trans and non-binary people take hormones. Some want to take hormones but cannot afford it, or don't have a path to get those hormones, meaning a prescription. And then there are scenarios where a trans or non-binary person cannot take hormones for health reasons. So you have to approach this conversation delicately. And the reason I'm bringing up something so specific as hormones is because it impacts where you put the singer, what choir you put them in, what voice part they're going to be singing, maybe what they are wearing during concerts, where they're going to be roomed on tours. It's, it's just a thing to be ahead of, and take the initiative as the leader of your chorus to, be ready for trans and non-binary singers. Are there more comments or questions?
Well, I'm going to post this. This is the link that I just posted there. So the Gala Choruses is the consortium of LGBT plus choruses around the world. And they are one of the organizations that sort of helped provide some of the initiative for the for the festival. And part of the funding for the festival through a whole bunch of grants from various organizations, thank you to all of the organizations that provided those grant funding, is to produce a series of videos, some of which are informational, some of which are biographical, about different aspects of the transgender voice. So if you go to this page, there will be a whole bunch of resources for you to educate yourself. If you happen to be a cis person or just are not aware of some of the concerns that might be in the community, we'll touch base on those, but there's only so much we can talk about in another half hour. And certainly the effects of hormones, that's an important physiological consideration, right? It's important that you as a director help the transgender singer navigate that aspect of their change. One, you should know that it only works if the singer is starting to take testosterone. If the singer is going off testosterone and is starting estrogen as a trans woman, our voices don't get that little medical boost of going back up in range. Any vocal change that we do has to be done just through exercise and patience. And, maybe that gets us, I don't know about your experience, Mari, but my experience is that maybe it's gotten me a major second. I mean, it's not very much. So.
I lucked out. I sang tenor. I went to St. Olaf College. I sang in the St. Olaf Choir. I was second tenor until the very year I left college. I started singing alto, and it was just this realization that I didn't even know my instrument. And I think there are several aspects to it, even social aspects. But considering my transition, I certainly, for me, it was important, and I understand it's not important for all trans women by any means, but for me, it was important to really be an alto and live my dream of being an alto. And I am, very fortunate to be able to do that. But I did want to comment just to tie up the idea of estrogen. Young trans people, depending on where they live, may have access to something called puberty blockers. And, here in the next decade, there are going to be some, sopranos, coloratura sopranos that are trans women, because they did not have testosterone taking over their body during the first puberty.
Right. They'll have only had to go
So
through.
I think when it comes to trans singers, you have to open your mind about, we could be sopranos, we can be altos, we can be tenors, and it's this, or basses, and it's the same thing with trans men and
Mhm.
non-binary people as well. It's, again, the gender binary is really limiting for us, personally, but also just kind of pedagogically and practically as well.
Yeah. And I think we got onto that because of the question of is it okay to call it a men's chorus if it is a men's chorus? And so yes, that's great. If part of your organization's mission is to create a space for men specifically, or for women specifically, or for non-binary people specifically, please, we need more of those. Non-binary singers will tell you we need non-binary specific spaces. Um, but going forward in the next decade or so, um, are is that men's chorus going to have roles for that male soprano? Is that women's chorus going to have roles for that female second bass?
Yeah.
And you know, that uh, and they will be good singers. They will be an asset to your chorus. They will be mediocre singers too. They will be all sorts of singers. That's the nature of we're normal as folks, come in all different range of abilities. Um, so
I wanted to share a comment. Um, Noreen Joe, mom of a trans daughter, her voice range still sits in the baritone range. She would probably feel best in a tenor slash bass choir, but only if it wasn't called a men's chorus. And I love this comment because I have known, again, I have taught in the high school age bracket. Um, I have witnessed um, young trans singers coming to choir, walking into the room the first semester and realizing, oh, this is a girls' chorus. Because a lot of those first year choruses are gendered,
yeah,
maybe even for pedagogical reasons. But that's alienating for a young trans singer, especially if, you know, they may not be out of the closet, they may not have started their transition,
right,
but they'll walk in, and they could look male or female or whatever, and decide with a single moment that they're going to quit choir. And that kind of sets this tone, or this idea to the rest of the school that, oh, choir is good here, but they're not very trans inclusive.
mhm,
And that may sound very niche, but it's happening in Texas last year and the past few years. And I think that's so important for people to know, because you know, we're talking about this now, but this has been an issue. And if you want trans singers in your chorus, and you want good singers in your chorus that happen to be trans, you have to be very upfront about it. And walking into a room full of boys or a room full of girls is definitely causes some dysphoria, discomfort, confusion for trans singers, especially ones that are maybe already transitioning or out, but their documents don't match. The school says they are one person and they are a different person, which is a whole other issue. I mentioned pronouns earlier. It's so important not to make assumptions about your singer's pronouns based on their appearance. and um, it
Ask
really
all,
ask.
you know,
But even
first day of school, you're going down your roster, you're calling out attendance, and say before you're calling out attendance, you know, please tell me if you have a preferred name that you like to go by, a nickname, and please tell me your pronoun. Okay, just make it mandatory for everybody. You know,
yeah,
it's not scary, as long as, you know, normalizing it, you know, helps. Normalizing it helps. So just,
it's not difficult.
yeah,
You know, when I travel and I'm giving a microphone and I'm conversing with somebody, I always say, "Can you introduce yourself? What is your name and your pronouns?" And just like we ask for somebody's name, if we can just follow that up with, "What are your pronouns?" We're creating an environment for people to be non-binary and feel, or transgender and, you know, gender creative, whatever it is. Just when you have authority, or you're the person in charge in the room, it is incumbent upon you to be the one asking, "What are your pronouns?" And you're
yeah,
not going to know just based on appearance.
no, no. And, you know, wouldn't it be cool if you are a choir director? Wouldn't it be cool to be the place where somebody feels safest to be themselves? You know, I think that's a goal, is that maybe the voice is such an integral part of who we are as a person. Singing in a choir already calls for a huge amount of openness and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that more so than a lot of other places, there's this personal connection, and I think there's a real opportunity for a singer who is not necessarily even out in the immediate vicinity. If you're, maybe they're not out in the rest of the school, but maybe they can be comfortable exploring their voice, exploring their identity, exploring who they are in your space.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very powerful, and I think very cool to watch. Um, you know, and
It's also the kindest approach, and, you know, those are the people we really need to elevate, those types of leaders. Um, um, I was wondering if we don't have any pressing questions, maybe if we could go back to the festival and talk about some of the events that happened. I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we had a cabaret where uh, there was a transgender youth chorus, a transgender adult chorus. Um, how big were those?
the transgender youth chorus was, I think, about 15 to 20. You know, so we're talking, and so they're mostly high school students that you know, were trans identified, 15 or 20, and this was on a school day. So this that you know, they have a chaperone essentially from the school willing to set up a field trip to participate in this. So there are more, you know, there are more young trans singers out there looking for that space to feel comfortable. The trans adult chorus, I don't know off the top of my head what their membership is right now.
It looked like 30 people on the stage
Yeah,
at least. And it was
yeah,
SATB, right?
and it's SATB, and it is still going strong. They're still rehearsing, and they will be performing at One Voice's next concert as a separate ensemble. And so that work is ongoing. The cabarets that you mentioned during the evening, one of the things I mentioned during the when I read off the mission statement, is an acknowledgement of just how many genres were operating. So
That
Mari
was
and I
so cool.
on the classical side of the spectrum, but we had Venus de Mars.
I can name them for you. I have them right here.
There you go. I mean, Venus de Mars, I think, performed on the first night, Friday night. Did she perform?
Yes, glam punk singer songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
We
Uh,
had Eli Conley, Americana singer songwriter. Nicholas Sitansi Metcalf, poet, storyteller. Elliot Harvey, vocalist, composer of
yeah,
A Stick and a Stone. Ellis Perez, poet, performer.
yeah.
Um, Bear Bergman,
We uh,
storyteller.
we had city councilor the second day that I remember, counselor, SEL, as in someone who provides counsel to a city, and music composer and performer. So really, we are. Unfortunately, it's backwards, but you know, you can read backwards. We can all read
Oh
backwards, right?
no!
Photo,
It was very representative of a lot of types of
uh,
music and whatnot.
yeah, it's just
And this,
you know that yeah. So that was our schedule over the 2 days, and we had 4 or 5 workshops or panels going all the time. Uh, you know, so that's how much how much excitement was going on about from the chorus is that you know there was I don't want to say concern, but you know you always worry when you're opening it up to say, hey, does anybody want to present at this festival? You know, you want people to present and to submit things, and there was just so much enthusiasm from. Ah, yes, the repertoire session. Did you want to talk about that, Mari?
I only stepped in for a moment because I was attending a different session. But
Oh,
um, I'll just say, was it Michael Buswitz-Karm and myself? They compiled uh, a packet of maybe 6, 7 different pieces,
mhm.
and the whole room read through a whole bunch of pieces. Like I said, I wasn't there the whole time, but uh, there were so many important conversations happening. You have the reading session. I also did a session called Expanding Definitions of Women to talk about the pedagogy of trans women. Um, and there was SLPs. I wanted to mention that session. Went right before mine. I didn't get to go, but Erin Donahue is an SLP. She's a cis straight woman, but she specializes with helping trans people vocally. She also has a classical background. So I want to mention really quick that I have a link to several of those resources from the festival compiled after the festival, and it's on the webpage. They are in the process of updating it so that there are more videos available, but there is one web page where all those resources are being compiled, and I will share that link here at the end of our stream. Do we have any more questions?
I'm not seeing any, so let's see here. Well, I mean, here. So I think that Mark did a really fabulous job with kind of talking about the breadth of what was there. We had workshops on, um, you know, the physiology of the voice and how it's slightly different for trans singers who have gone through or are going through puberty twice. Um, And it's really we had a workshop about a really interesting topic that was about this conflict between uh, the singer's gender identity, but in opera, right? In opera, all of
Mm-hmm.
the roles are gendered, and you have, so how do we approach in an open, inclusive way, the this conflict and potential dysphoria, or concerns of a soprano that is slowly migrating their way down to bass? How do you, as a choral director, um, how do you stay open to that and are aware of their concerns? How sorry, I am going in too many different directions, but I think the opera question, or the vocal style question, is really important. The title of the session was "What the Fach?" FACH. Uh, we all loved it. What the Fach? Um, the Fach, if you're not familiar, is this sort of a German system of classifying the voice. You have your romantic tenors, your lyric tenors, your lyric baritones, your basso profundi, coloratura sopranos, lyric sopranos, yada yada yada. So, and depending on which Fach you end up classifying and developing yourself into, that that's what roles you get, and it can be very upsetting for a cis singer because your voice changes as it ages, to migrate from one Fach that they've trained and worked on their entire life, and then suddenly, discover, no, you know what? I'm stuck in this other classification now. I have to learn a whole new set of roles, and that can be disorienting again for a cis singer. Uh, Imagine how disorienting and scary it can be for a transgender singer to be going from being able to sing the Queen of the Night. Am I going to end up as the Papageno? Am I going to end up as Lorastro? He doesn't know at the end of the day. And so there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of dysphoria on those types of issues. So
We're
be
not
patient
gonna. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. I was just
with
gonna
us,
say, there's not enough time to talk about every session, but
right?
I would, before we move on, I just wanted to maybe name a couple of the sessions since I have this pamphlet with me, and it is online. You can look it up. We'll put a link to that as well. But you have the heights and depths of vocal liberation that was led by a non-binary SLP student. Um, the reading session, transgender and queer composers, writing your truth through poetry, indie publishing for poets and composers, um, a trans singer's vocal journey, soprano to tenor, modification for the trans singer, the science behind the art, um, keeping a trans choir sustainable, radical acceptance and queerness. What is it like to perform in a trans choir? Uh, Welcoming transgender singers, creating choirs. Um, so there's a lot of those discussions going on. And I remember wanting to go to things that I just could not go to. So
Yes.
hopefully this event will happen again. And a lot of people will be able to attend just like the first time. Um, uh, let's check really quick for questions. I think we got to Susan's question.